What a way to start a stream.
Yes, indeed.
So, what's up, everybody? I'm Curtis.
I'm John.
And welcome back to Player Tuesday. So, if you're new to the stream, thank you for stopping by. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel that is also affiliated with this. It helps me out greatly. So, today we are going to be talking about some pretty hot topics, but first, we got to ask the important question. So, John, how was your weekend?
Oh, it's pretty good.
Do anything fun?
It was pretty lazy. I didn't grab my keys. I didn't grab my phone. I didn't even grab pants.
Yes.
It was a pantsless weekend.
No pants weekend. That is the best weekend. Oh, man. Did you go see your folks this weekend? Well, I guess not. You stayed at home without pants on.
Nope.
But
Watched some TV.
What'd you watch?
Started a new anime, Claymore. Have you ever heard of Claymore?
Claymore. I have not.
It's been around for a while. I've never seen it before, but it's okay. It's actually pretty good compared to what I expected, because I know it's gotten mixed reviews before. So I was pleasantly surprised. It's pretty good.
So what's it about? Is it, well, without giving spoilers to anyone who hasn't seen it, but
yeah, it's like it's got a feel of sort of a medieval times with a fantasy sort of inclusion.
So is it like Knights of the Round Table kind of?
They're not exactly. There's villages that get attacked by Yoma, which are demons that can take the appearance of men, and so there's an organization called the Claymores that of half human, half Yoma that take it down. I guess that are paid to relieve a village or a town of Yoma.
So it's like mercenaries,
sort of
like demon mercenaries.
The themes here are that there's distrust between the humans and the Claymores because they are half human. The Claymores themselves are pretty robotic in demeanor. So there's questions about connections. Like, connections are sort of a rarity among Claymores. They're typically pretty isolated and solo. So there's some theming about friends and family and connections among and blah, 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 that kind of stuff.
Cool.
It's done pretty well.
I'd never heard of it. Then again, I honestly don't remember the last time I watched anime. Like, I think it might have been early high school. Not that I have anything against it. It's just like, I don't know. I don't really watch that much TV. But this weekend, the wife and I, we did start a new show called The Sinner. I can't remember if I told you about it earlier or not.
I don't think you did.
So it's actually pretty intense. Some friends of ours had recommended it to me, and then I kept hearing about it. So we're like, we got a few hours to kill, sure. Well, we really didn't have a few hours. We got sucked into it, but
Was that good then?
Yeah, it was actually really good. Like, the first episode definitely leaves you like, what the heck is going on? So this isn't a spoiler. I mean, I don't consider really anything that happens. I don't consider anything that happens in like the first half of the first episode to be a spoiler. It's kind of like,
God.
Plus, it's in the description of the show, but So Jessica Biel plays this one chick named Cora or something, and she murders somebody. And the show kind of takes off after that, and you kind of go through like what's going on with her, what's going on with the situation, and it's like pretty intense, like everyone sucks, everyone has flaws kind of like crime show. And it really gets you thinking about like the human mind. And I think that's why it really stuck with the wife and I, because like I don't know why, but I just really like the psychological aspect of things.
And like you're saying, it's one of the it's kind of a dime a dozen type of, but it's executed pretty well though.
Yeah. It's like the filming is great in it, and the acting. It actually has a few well-known actors in it. Probably the two biggest are, of course, Jessica Biel, and then the main detective is. Oh, what all was he in? He was in he was Casper's dad, and Casper the Ghost, one of those movies.
Casper the Ghost had a dad.
Yeah, he used to be
I'll take your
human.
word.
Of course, he had a dad. But what else did he play in? It's right on the. I can't remember, but he's been in a few things.
I'll take your word.
But anyway,
would you say that the story is feels fresh, even though it's a somewhat of a timeless tale?
Yeah, I would say so. Like it doesn't feel like it's been recycled from anything. Okay. And it's not like there's crazy supernatural crap going on with it too. Like
that's a good point. I mean, that's something that's been plugged into shows a lot recently. It seems anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting about The Sinner is that, you know, there isn't anything funky going on. Like, there's no aliens. There's no, like, supernatural beings. It's just, like, people are just really screwed up and damaged. And it's, like...
It's almost like you don't need all those supernatural...
Yeah. It's like, I can't remember what the quote's from, but it's like... it's like watching a train wreck. You know you shouldn't look, but it's just like people are so screwed up that like you just can't turn away. You're like, how do these awful things, like how do people do such bad things? But anyway, and after our discussion last week about Fortnite, I decided to finally download that, and I played a little bit. I told you this. But,
yeah, that I know.
So Fortnite, I haven't had that much fun with the game in a long time. Like I was telling you, it's such a pick it up and run with it and put it right back down sort of game. Like you can be super competitive with it and do match after match after match, or you can just take it one match at a time, like go do something, come back a little later, like do another match, and it still feels fresh, like just as fresh as the first time you picked it up and played it. It's not super grindy. You're not grinding for better equipment. Everyone's on the same level as far as having equipment. You start out with nothing. There are weapons all over the map, so you're not like searching every bush hoping to find like a handgun.
Yeah.
And not to mention, what I've been primarily playing, I haven't really done any one versus everyone or PvE, or is that what it's? I don't know words, but I haven't done that. What I've been doing is squads. So basically, you have 50 on your team, the other team has 50, and last team standing wins. I've won a majority of the ones that I've been in, but I've only killed like 2 people. I've probably played like 15, 16 matches, and just like, it's hard. It's really hard. It's a game where like, if you get frustrated by dying, you will hate it. But yeah, and then other than that, I played some more Super Metroid. I was showing you. I don't know if you've ever played it. You should definitely pick it up though. It's an old game, but I was telling John earlier, it's aged so well that even if you play games with like modern graphics, 4K, everything looks crisp, you can still pick up Super Metroid and play it, and it still looks great. Like, you're not going to struggle visually. I think last week or the week before I used a reference to Legend of the Dragoon. I went from Xbox 360 and I couldn't even play that game anymore. Like, the graphics were just so bad. I couldn't tell what was what.
Yeah.
At least with Metroid, yeah, you know what you're looking for. You can find it relatively easy, and it's just, if you get lost, just wander around. Eventually, you'll find your way through the map.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be as flashy or as even like indie platformers in today's market. It's not going to have as many fine touches on it, but at the same time, it's not your blocky graphics from the NES or even from Atari or anything like that. I mean, it's not real pixelated or like that. It's pretty clean.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, and me and John were collaborating on this. We'll totally have to do a stream one day where we just like play Super Metroid and just like talk about all the mechanics and things like that, because it's just such a well-made game.
Yeah, it's an incredibly immersive game. It's really easy to get yourself lost in it and just...
Yeah. And speaking of getting yourself lost, I told you it'd be cheesy. So our first main topic today, and I'm sure everyone has heard about it, and hopefully you haven't been affected by it, but we're going to talk about MoviePass. And if you don't know what MoviePass is, it's kind of like a subscription-based movie platform, kind of like Netflix, except different. Instead of watching it without your pants on at your house, you go to a theater, you pay a flat rate, you get X amount of movies per day or per month, and you can go and watch it. Now, when MoviePass released, I forgot how much it was. It was $11 or $12 a month. And they actually dropped it down to $9 a month for one movie per day. Now, if you've ever been to the movie theaters here recently, you know a $9 movie ticket is unheard of. Maybe if you hit a matinee show, you could get down to like $7. But for the most part, it's going to be way up there.
Sure.
And they recently released another subscription you could pay for. It was $7 and some change, and you get 3 movies a month. Now, this is per person, so if my wife and I wanted to get it, the lowest we could get it is like $16 a month, which really isn't bad considering, 3 movies a week. That's a nice date night. But there's recently been some turmoil with this. Some people started noticing when they went to the theater that their MoviePass was no longer working. And come to find out, MoviePass had actually run out of money to be able to pay for these tickets. This is something that in the article we were looking at, they kind of foreshadowed from the very beginning. MoviePass got a lot of crap saying, that's not going to last. You can't sell tickets for that cheap. It costs you more to buy the ticket than to sell it. And if you know anything about business, that's just not how it works. So the CEO of the company, what he was banking on, and he kind of halfway got it, was being able to start out, get the popularity through the roof, and then be able to negotiate on bulk ticket pricing. I don't think he quite got it, given the circumstance. He actually had to take a $5 million, what they call it, a loan or a transfer from one of his hedge funds, in order to be able to kind of keep the business going a little bit longer. Now, basically, it was written out in the documents that if they had to access said hedge fund, then basically they're getting ready to go belly up. The people from the hedge fund, I believe, let me double check myself. Where is it? Helios and Matheson. Business Insider reported. If the company is unable to make the required payments to its merchant and fulfill processors, the merchant and fulfillment processors may cease processing payments for MoviePass Incorporated. So yeah, basically they're out of money. They're getting ready to go belly up. So if you have that subscription service, honestly, I would be asking for your monthly payment back, or at least a proration of time that it's been down. I think they have since come and said that they're planning on getting, all these tickets, and they're going to have plenty of tickets for the newer showings. But honestly, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
Like, I would not put your $9 a month on it. Also, since MoviePass started, some of the other movie companies have kind of been toying with the idea of running a similar subscription. AMC is actually offering a plan called AMC Stubs A-List. Now, to give you a sense of how much they're undercharging themselves, AMC, which is probably the biggest movie theater franchise, is charging $19.95 a month for 3 movies a week. Now, MoviePass was offering $7.99.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know if it was a case of he started the fire and couldn't just be like, sorry guys, we're going belly up. We're going to have to charge more per month. I think he overestimated how much business he would get and under figured the amount of money he would have to charge per subscription. Just isn't a good situation. I hate to see companies like this fail.
Yeah.
We were actually talking about getting MoviePass the other week, and that way we would be able to see movies, have more to talk about with you guys, and that's sad. I hate that. I hate that for the company. I hate that for the employees, and I hate that especially for the people who were paying, because I hope you got your money's worth. That's all I've got to say about that. But yeah, so what do you guys think? Do you think that the price of admission in the movies now, just isn't worth the experience that you get? I know a lot of times when I go, and I didn't see this movie, but this is a amazing words. This is a fantastic example of what I'm talking about here. So the movie The Quiet Place. I know a lot of people that went to see it hated it in theaters because you always have the crying child, you always have the idiot on the cell phone. I'm sure those things would murder the experience for you. But to me, going to the movie is always kind of a treat. It's a little bit special. We don't do it that often. And when we go, it feels like it's almost like going to a spa. You go for the experience. Your significant other can give you a massage, but going there and getting it done and being pampered is worth it. Sure. Same thing with the theater. You go there, you're surrounded by people who are probably into the same thing you are as far as movies, and you go for the experience. But is that worth the money nowadays?
See, and that's a good point, but but like you say, to treat yourself, what makes that special is that it's not every day. You're not going every day to the spa. You're not going every day to the movie theater. It's a fairly expensive exercise, so once in a while you get a couple friends together, you go with your family to the movies, and you go see something, and that's what makes it special.
Yeah.
Argumentatively, streaming services like Netflix, and the fact that you have movies at the touch your fingers, that you can never leave the couch, and the convenience of it easily steps in the way of the viability of going to the theaters, at least to some degree. It's definitely a competitive edge for theater companies.
Yeah, and I can see that. And especially, like, my wife and I rarely watch TV anyway. Like, I have the hardest time sitting through a movie. But my wife and I, we primarily watch shows. I don't know if that's because it's easier to pick up a show, watch a couple episodes, put it down, and be done with it. Or if it's you get much more emotionally attached to the characters in the show because you watch it more often, you watch it longer over a period of time. Whereas like a movie, like a series, you might get 4, maybe 5 out of a really good series. Whereas a show, you're getting like 5 seasons.
That's a good point. In that too, in theory, movies are just as engaging as television series as long as they draw you into the experience of that moment. When you're going to theaters and you have folks on the phone, you have babies crying, that immediately saps you out of that experience. And when you're sitting on home at the couch just watching, I mean, it's not quite the same environment. Maybe that's what's really dying here is the classic movie viewing experience. But I would say that definitely the idea that TV shows can be digested so easily and so quickly that you can watch as little or as much as you want to is definitely a plus in their favor.
And it sucks. Like you watch all these old like movies, and the teenagers always went to the movies and things like that, and it's like part of me still kind of yearns for that, where like, every Friday, oh man, let's go see like The Blob or Birds or whatever, and like they all pile in the car and go. But I feel like those days are dying. Like pretty soon, like movie theaters are gonna be like Blockbuster, and they're just gonna be like the butt end of a joke.
By the way, that's another issue with theaters potentially, is that it seems like to make up for the lack in revenue that they're taking in, they increase their ticket prices. Yeah, which is just a cyclical issue. It sends more people away from the experience.
God, I remember last time me and the wife went to a movie, it was something like, it was like a $40 or $50 movie by the time like you buy the tickets, you go in. We always split like a large popcorn and a drink, and still we spend $40. And it's ridiculous. Yeah. Like,
it's outrageous.
And we have 2 movie theaters in our area. One of them's Regal, one of them's AMC.
That's right.
The AMC, I haven't been to it since it became AMC.
Is that the
old Carmike? The old Carmike cinema.
Okay. I think we're
that one used to be considerably cheaper, but I don't know where they're AMC now. But either way, sad times. I hate to see that. And if you're a subscriber to Movie Pass, like I said, I would seriously try to get prorated at the minimum for your outage of service. Same thing, you wouldn't be out of cell phone service for a month and still pay full price. I mean, you're paying for the service, you deserve it. So, our next topic, speaking of crappy service, at least in the beginning, that one wasn't quite as good. I have to work on that. Needs a little polish.
Need to work in your segues. Oh yeah. Oh, No Man's Sky. That's right. So this past week, No Man's Sky actually rose to number 1 on Steam, and I don't know if you remember all the events that precluded No Man's Sky when it first arrived on the scene, but
I remember it got a lot of hate. Like, that was the most, besides Battlefield 2, That was the most crapped on game in a long time.
So, for those of you that don't know, No Man's Sky was a video game that was made an exclusive for the PS4. I believe it was released in 2014. It was supposed to be sort of sci-fi survival type, that you would navigate from planet to planet, that you would go out in a spaceship into the cosmos, land on a planet, that you would excavate and look for resources and manage your survival on the planet to further your goals. When it first showed up in 2014 E3 trailer, just from that moment, hype upon hype was heaped upon this thing. There was some extreme expectations that fans had for it. Mm-hmm. That's partly in fault due to consumer speculation.
Yeah.
People kept taking guesses and leaps as to what would be in it, and that built upon itself and upon itself.
Yeah. And the whole rumor factory that goes into it, which is like, anytime you research something, like, don't just take the word of the first thing you read, like.
and to be fair, it wasn't it wasn't fully on the consumer's fault. Though I know that there were many wary people, many who were aloof, and they were aware that this looked a little too good to be true. Mm-hmm. Definitely waiting till after that release to get their order in. But not. There was speculation taken from that trailer. There was interviews with Sean Murray, the game's creator, the founder of Hello Games, and he's also the lead developer. He's pretty involved in the project. It's his project, there were a lot of interviews where statements were made, and many folks feel that these statements that were made were not representative of what made it into the game. It's funny when I keep looking it up and reading about the game that he was trying to make. In the kind of experience that he wanted to have.
So here is the first article. This is from MSN Entertainment. Basically here they were going through and just kind of giving you details on how it received some criticism, things like that. It was talking about the promises that were made and weren't really followed through with. Which, did you want to go ahead and hit this part?
I mean, I wasn't gonna read through them, but
you want me to read through it while you look real quick?
If you want.
Yeah. So basically, the internet being the internet, and how you can't ever put anything past the internet, has compiled a list of things that they feel like were promised but weren't delivered on. And this is from Redditor Simon Cymen 90. So basically, these are missing features. Planetary physics. I'm guessing that, I don't know if by physics they mean temperature ranges, like health or anything like that. Let's see here. Faction reputation with meaningful gameplay impact. So basically what they mean by that is like with Fallout New Vegas. There were certain factions, and if you became enemies of these factions, they would hunt you down and kill you, and you couldn't go in certain areas or do certain missions. So that's sort of what they meant by there. To me, if that was promised, that's a fairly big one to miss, considering the whole game is about exploration and survival. That's a pretty key point I would want to make sure stayed in the game. Um, Looking through here. NPC outside trading posts and other docks. Again, if this game is exploration and survival, then you're going to want to be able to trade with other planets, other organizations, factions, things like that. That's a pretty high point that was missed as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dispute from both from both the players and from both Hello Games about what was actually supposed to be in it, what was said was going to be in it, what actually appeared. But the bottom line really is that I keep seeing quotations from Sean Murray about there's a certain experience he was trying to garner with the game. The idea of going out into the stepping. I think I remember something along the lines of walking into one of those sci-fi covers that you'd see on. He linked it to a childhood experience of staring up the stars and the imaginings of walking the universe, so to speak. And I think the main issue is that fans. I think one of the main problems, regardless of the specifics, is that fans don't and didn't feel that way when the game was released. That mindset of feeling so free and feeling like you're actually in a living, breathing world that's really operating, that isn't just some sort of pseudo artificial intelligent animals that walk around, but a real breathing ecosystem with the animals interacting with each other, with the environments. This wasn't what was. And to be fair, Hello Games is an indie company. I think they only had 12 employees on the release of the game. So it's one of those things where probably a little bit too much expectation put into what was hoped for rather than what would truly be viable. But argumentatively, there did seem to be a lot of confused misinformation being supplied to the consumers.
Yeah, I'm going to look this up real quick. I feel like... Hang on here. You can keep going while I look this up real quick.
Well, and I mean, that's up to the main point, too, is that really one of the main problems of the situation is that Hello Games failed to counteract this ever-mounting stockpile of rumors. I mean, this could only be expected as what was to come. In fact, Sean Murray put an apology letter in the kit that came with the pre-orders for the game. He released a letter, I believe, a day prior to the game's release, saying that this is what this game is, and this is what would be in this game, and these are the things that were imagined, whatever maybe you imagine the game to be. In fact,
but yeah, what I was trying to look up, I can't really see any good articles because I'm guessing that Hello Games was accused of not embezzling, but improper use of some of the funds that they had raised for No Man's Sky, which I remember hearing about, and that was one of the things that they got crapped on. But if I remember correctly, I think they asked for $90,000 to make this game. To make a game...
Are you telling me that it was crowdfunded?
From... I believe it was crowdfunded. Was No Man's Sky crowdfunded? Boop.
Anyway, here's a snippet that I was from that letter he had released the day prior. That means this maybe isn't the game you imagined from those trailers. If you hope for things like PvP multiplayer, or city building, piloting freighters, or building civilizations, that isn't what No Man's Sky is. Over time, it might become some of those things through updates, which is not a bad thing. This should have been done. There should have been some acknowledgement to the players about these reactions, but and about the hype that kept ever building. But the day before is not the proper handling of it, and so there's kind of no surprise that there was as much of an outrage over what was given, what was received versus what was expected.
Yeah, and I looked it up. They were crowdfunded. Okay. But yeah, I remember them. It was right around $90,000, and for an indie company,
so that's an additional.
Other than what they had raised through crowdfunding $90,000.
I mean, are you telling me the whole game was only built on $90,000? Okay.
No, they had more money than that. That's just what.
That's what they specifically crowdfunded up. Okay.
So, with that, $90,000's not really a lot of money to be able to have an indie company make this sort of level game. Yeah. It's pretty expansive. It hadn't really been done before. I feel like it was kind of out of competition for Star Citizen. Again, he stated that running freighters, things like that, isn't what No Man's Sky is, but kind of that same aspect of taking on the challenge of creating how vast space is. They do share similar properties there, whereas Star Citizen, there's still a lot of exploration. There's still a lot of I think they're more in space than like on planet, like on ground. But similar aspect, like it's a big world, and that's a big challenge for an indie company to take on. So,
in a sense, the game delivered was pretty much the game promised. A sandbox interstellar game where you can travel from world to world via a network, via space, through ships, and that you can explore and excavate, break down the world to your means. But I think the real argument is that the experience that Sean Murray believes this game would deliver was not felt by the players. Oh.
The heck is that noise?
Good thing we have mouse straps out. You think?
I'll tell you what, you keep going. I'm gonna look and see what that noise was.
Okay. Oh. Well, anyway. Despite the bitter dispositions of the players, and despite all of the promises that players felt weren't delivered, Hello Games has continued to update the game, and it's led up to their most recent update, which is called Next, which there's a few different features here. They introduced co-op and competitive open world multiplayer functions.
I have no idea what that was.
I was just telling them that despite the reactions, Hell Games has continued to update the game, and that leading up to this current update Next, they got a few different features. One of them is multiplayer, both in a in an open world sense, both in co-op and competitive. This was something that was speculated by fans to be in the game. In the E3 trailer, it appeared, and it wasn't specified, but there appeared to be potentially interaction between the player and other ships. In interviews, Sean Murray talked about it. It was asked if two players. It was said that I think there's something like 14,000 planets in No Man's Sky.
Dang.
So Sean Murray was asked, could two players meet up then? And he said, well, there's so much that it's really, really unlikely. They said, was it possible? And I do believe he said yes. Now, don't quote me. It's been a while since I've looked at the interview. But the answer is no. Not in its initial release.
Yeah.
You can't interact in No Man's Sky. At least you couldn't. There was recordings footage of two players going to the same place, and it was showing that while they were on the same planet, they could not interact. But that's something that's going to be added in this new update.
So was it something like they went to the same planet, but it was separate servers? And the server randomly generated this planet and this planet, even though they had the same name?
I'm assuming. Or perhaps they were on the same planet, but not visible to one another. Which I don't know if, in fact, they were on the same server, on the same planet, that interactions from one could be seen by another. I don't know. To be very honest, I've heard about it, but I never really looked into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was one of those folks that No Man's Sky was on the periphery, but it was something that seemed interesting, but I wasn't so gung-ho for. And then after the real kickback from all the fans there, it's something that I just avoided. I knew that it was seen as a disappointment. Honestly, if I were to play it, I'd probably go, this is about what I would have expected. But
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact that... of the fact that it was received so poorly, they've been continually updating to the point where that gap between what was expected and what it actually was is maybe starting to shrink a little.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe in a few years it'll be worth the full asking price.
Right. Right.
Oh.
Yeah. And, yeah.
You know, it does bring up an interesting question, which is... in a way, that's a good thing, then, that No Man's Sky has been able to keep updating the game and keep making it better and better. But the fact that it released the game in such an unfinished state is not that uncommon in today's market. Maybe not to the same degree, but we see it all the time of games being released incredibly glitchy, terribly glitchy.
Bethesda.
Mechanics that just don't work and that have to be endlessly patched until they're even playable, some of these.
Yeah.
And I mean, so what do you think about that? The idea that games can be repaired, so to speak, over time.
Yeah. So it's hard because with old games, like what you got on that cart was the game. There were no patches. There was no revision. Well, there might have been revisions, but you couldn't just update the game and fix whatever was wrong with it. So developers had to spend a little more time fine-tuning and testing. Now, the issue with that is games are much, much bigger now. There's a lot more that goes in with it. So it's kind of a... I see where you could crap on either side. I'm personally not a big fan of releasing a known broken game. That's one thing if a bug pops up and you're like, oh crap. But if you released a game, and especially if there's a game-breaking glitch in it, like, that's crappy. You charged full price for a half-done game. Case in point, Battlefield 4, when it released, was garbage. It was the most unoptimized, like, heap of junk. There were several things factoring in, but I know people that had like thousands of dollars, like computers, and could barely maintain 30 frames per second in it. Same thing with PUBG when it released. PUBG, like, still to this day is not quite where I would want it. It still feels very,
Would
very
you say
alpha.
it's still in an alpha? It is.
Yeah, it feels alpha. Like,
And they ported it to the Xbox. That's still so crazy to me.
yeah. Granted, like, going from like a
Rather than fix the game before porting,
well, to an extent, like I can say it, when they ported it, it was a much better game than when it released.
sure, but if it's still in an alpha stage, that means it's still incomplete. Which means that just by the principle of the matter, you ported a game that is not complete for the full price.
I want to check on the price of that. I didn't buy it full price. I bought it on sale, so I'm not totally sure. But yeah, like that player.
Here's an idea.
Yeah, it's a $30 game.
It is for Steam. Do you know about other?
I don't know, on PlayStation or anything. Yeah, so $30 gets you an alpha.
Yeah.
That's crap.
Now, what if video games did this? What if they rushed for time? In an ideal world, every game would be given the amount of time needed to complete it.
True.
But rushed for time, got to get the project out. What if games were released in states? What if there was a governing board that said this game is officially in this state? An alpha, a beta, the real state of the game, and that there was qualified pricing that went for. Whereas if a fully completed game is $60, then a game that was, say, an alpha would only be $10, $15.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a hard thing to pull off because pretty much like, so if that was the case, PUBG, when they released, they would have released it as full game. They wouldn't have released it as alpha because they would have been like, we can only charge X amount. Like,
right. It would never happen, but also, if it did, ideally, if you were to theoretically do this, there would have to be some sort of authority that would approve the status. Because this is PUBG's not the first game to be released in such an unfinished state, or even a state that would be that seems unfinished.
Yeah.
As in, for example, I weirdly remember hearing about this game, Kane and Lynch 2, which I know nothing about Kane and Lynch. But I know that Kane and Lynch 2, one of the main arguments against it, it's only about 4-6 hours.
Yeah.
And that is, for what the game had to offer, that's arguably an unfinished game, even though in theory it's got a beginning, middle, and end. And I don't know, I'm sure there's glitches in it, but in theory it's pretty well polished.
Yeah.
But is nowadays, especially for the type of game that it was, is a 4-hour campaign, worth $60?
No, absolutely not.
I don't even know if it was released for 60. It may have been 40. I'm not sure, but
yeah, to me they should. A 6-hour game I would consider finished if the gameplay was great and the story was just as great. You can make up for time with story. Same thing like Warframe. I know is I have it downloaded. I've never played it, but from what I've heard, that's a game you can spend hundreds of hours in and never complete. Um, and not complete, not never complete, but so you can drag out something and make it like an 80-hour game.
Sure.
But to me, like a good, if I could beat it in a weekend, I would say that was probably a good finished like time frame. But yeah, like 4 hours, that's not.
I agree where you're going with this too. Is that, yeah, I mean, I'm not one of these people who thinks that the longer the game is, the better, because there's some games where, I mean, too much length. I mean, with anything, the longer it is, the less engaged you become over time. Maybe to put it better, the more and more time you spend with something, then naturally the less engaged you'll become with a piece of media and entertainment.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that 80-hour plus games crush narratives, crush the normal narrative structure. It's really hard to have that. I mean, Fallout is told in a completely different way than the average narrative. Every little encounter is its own little story, and they all come together as an anthology, interlude of stories. You couldn't have one long cohesive story throughout all these hours of gameplay. It just rip it to pieces. There's no way you can engage.
Yeah. To me, like you said, there's two main ways that you can make an 80-hour game and it not suck. Same thing with the 6-hour game. You have the story. So like what you said with Fallout, you have a lot of little stories that kind of intertwine together and make up for one big tale, or you grind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Borderlands, I have like close to 300 hours in Borderlands 2, and it's just grind. Like you can beat the game in 4 hours.
Sure.
But in order to like get all the best gear and stuff, you have to grind, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of people shy away from that. They would rather have intense story than intense gear.
Right. And this is something that could never be enforced, so to speak, as in that topic time on earlier. But I think that the real criminal, the real criminal intake with that 4 hours kind of gameplay is when it goes to something that's like a first-person shooter campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to some extent, in theory, the multiplayer is supposed to cover that. In general, it does, and I guess that's the nature of. But for single-player experiences, while they shouldn't last hours upon hours, too short a time should be reflected in the price tag.
Mm-hmm.
Uncharted Lost Legacy, that came out, I believe, this past year, I think. And it was too lengthy to be a DLC. But it didn't quite span the amount of time. Maybe, I was going to say that was intended. I think maybe that's not true. Maybe it was intended to be a shorter game.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe only 6 to 8 hours, or even maybe this is the fourth. I'm not actually sure on the length. I know that it's shorter than the average Uncharted game, by a fair amount, but it's reflected in the price tag. It was released as $40, not as a $60 game. And in a ideal and fair world, that is the way it should be handled. But
yeah, I agree. The modern, to go back to the original question, but the modern market, it's just easier to release and then patch versus kind of fine-tune, perfect, and then release. Yeah. Plus, I know a lot of companies are under the gun.
Yeah.
And when they do have to delay, they do get a lot of garbage for it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's kind of a
catch-22 on that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so, on to other companies that are facing some hot water right now. So, Intel has been seeing some stocks fall. I believe it's down as far as 6 to 7%. Now, part of this is due to them delaying the release of new processors. They released the 8700K, which is a 6-core, 12-thread processor, a few months back. That's actually what's in Wi-Fi build. But they had talked about releasing an 8-core, but it got delayed, among other things that got delayed. And now they're kind of facing some heat for it. So, to kind of give some backstory, so a year, or actually I think it's been close to 2 years ago, AMD was basically like falling out. Like their stocks could be bought for pennies on the dollar. The company itself just wasn't heading anywhere. They were basically in a aim for the budget market and try to survive. Now, that's not the worst place they could have been in, but it didn't really give them any room to grow. So they got a new CEO. She kind of started ruffling some feathers and getting some production going, and they came out with AMD Ryzen. Now, Ryzen offered up to an 8-core processor. That was unheard of on the consumer level because it was 8 cores, 16 threads, if I am correct. Ryzen 7. So, let me double check myself. I haven't looked into Ryzen in a long time, guys. I apologize. So, yes, 8 cores, 16 threads. That was only found on Intel's enthusiast grade level, so like the X99 level CPUs, which were like $1,000. Ryzen 7 1800X released for right at $350. So it really shook up the market. People were able to get these high core count CPUs for their workstations, things like that, and it not break the bank. Intel really didn't see it as an issue when they first released. However, as time went on, you saw a whole lot of AMD builds coming into the forums and build groups and things like that. And it got to the point where Intel was starting to sweat. So they released the 8700K early. They weren't planning to do that for quite some time later. But before that, when AMD was struggling along, Intel was top dog, and they knew it. So they would release, quad-core 8-thread, quad-core 8-thread, quad-core 8-thread for 5 generations. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you're only getting 5% here, 5% there, 5% there. So people were still running like 4-generation old hardware, and it's still like treat them just fine for games, for light productivity. I'm using a processor that is 4 generations behind, and I'm just now feeling the sweat from it because of all the video editing and things like that. So Intel got complacent, and they were just releasing, incremental increases. And while they still had their teams, working on the enthusiast grade stuff, they were releasing 10 cores, and then they released like 12, 14, 16, all the way up to 18 cores now. But again, like these were like $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 CPUs. AMD releases Ryzen and then Threadripper, which was 16 cores, 32 threads for half the price of Intel's 16 core CPUs. So it was just like this huge upset. And long story short, I know that was a little bit of backstory and a little bit boring, but you really should go back and look at that because it is quite ridiculous how long we just like accepted this. But now that we don't have to, Intel stock is starting to drop. They're starting to lose value. They're starting to fill the competition. They're delaying product releases because they're not ready yet and should have been ready. But the reason that they're delaying is their next chips are going to be 10 nanometer. Right now we're sitting at 14 nanometer.
Okay.
And some of you are probably asking, like, well, what is the difference? So a nanometer is like a fraction of the width of one of your hairs. This is the size of like the copper that's running through the CPU to be able to send signal from the transistor to this part, this part, this part. And that in itself is actually like a pretty fascinating subject. So to make a CPU, basically what they do is they take sand because it's comprised mostly of silicone. There might be some like quartz and stuff, but I think even quartz is made of silicone. And then they refine it down to like 99% silicone. And they make these like 300 millimeter wafers out of it. And each one, they'll make a whole bunch of CPU dies on it. And they like, essentially they mold it and then drop in the transistors and then put in the copper and then a filler and then like UV bake it. So that way it like hardens it and they can add the next layer. And there's multiple layers on these little dies. And then they slice up the wafer, get all the individual dies, they go to testing, they get bins. So basically, if I understand it correctly, and some of you who are probably more inclined on this than me, what they do is every single CPU is basically off the same 14 nanometer process. Like KB Lake is all one wafer.
Okay.
They go through and test it, and if it doesn't meet this specification, but it meets this, then they classify it i5, and then i3, and then Pentium. So like the lower the grade, the lower the quality of the chip was.
Gotcha.
But it's all essentially the same chip. They'll go in and disable features and things like that. But you get all the way up to your i7s. So that's how CPUs are made, roughly. But so 10 nanometers is pretty impressive. And it's causing them a lot of manufacturing headache, and that's why they're delaying it so much.
Sure.
AMD is trying to shake things up again, and they are working with a Taiwanese company on a 7 nanometer.
Oof.
So like they're almost cutting in half the how big they need the transistors to be. So the smaller the nanometer, the faster the chip.
Right.
Think of it like a bowling alley. You have a, excuse me, you have a 30-meter bowling alley, a 15-meter bowling alley, and a 5-meter bowling alley. You roll the ball the same speed, which one's going to go down the lane the fastest? The 5-meter one. Because it has the shortest distance to go.
I thought it was rhetorical.
No. Well, come on, John. Come on. It's maths.
What is this, third grade?
But yeah, so that's the easiest way to think of it. So basically the signal will have to travel a shorter amount of distance in the CPU to be able to do all of its processing. So yeah, so the smaller, the better, or the faster at least. But if AMD like perfects this, and you know, I don't look for that to release for probably another like I'd say 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think if Intel is struggling with 10. I think AMD is going to have an even harder time. Thus, it's going to take them longer. And honestly, I think we're probably getting pretty close to the bottleneck of CPU performance is going to be the copper that's inside of it. I think we're going to get down to a point where the resistance that's found in copper is going to be what holds us back.
Sure.
But that's a completely different topic for a completely different day. But yeah, so Intel is feeling the heat. They're struggling a little bit. It's not to the point where they're going to pull a movie pass and go belly up. But it's definitely something that has gotten their attention. And yeah, I can't wait to see what the future holds on that one. So AMD's got them in the corner. They've got them wore out. I'm just waiting on that final blow where they're gonna really take top shelf.
Well, and like you said, they're nowhere near out of it. They have been the biggest brand for a while, for a long while, and obviously, I'm guessing that your assumptions to why they've become so complacent, lost their competitive edge, is because they thought that with brand name they could outshadow, even though better product is being put out. Obviously, they're finding that's not the case, but you know, they've been in the game for a while, so they at least have some knowledge on how to, even if AMD overshadows them for a little bit. There's no telling. Potentially, if they step their game up enough, they could be back to a competitive state within some time, right?
Oh, yeah. And so, speaking of AMD, like, part of the reason they were able to get, like, 16 cores on a processor, so basically, the way it worked was you had your CPU, which is like a square, and then you have that heat sink. Well, you take that heat sink off, and there's one piece of silicone, like, in the center. AMD was able to put 4 CPU dies on one chip. Now, their EPYC servers use all 4 of those.
Gotcha.
Threadripper only uses 2. And what binded those together was called the Infinity Fabric. Not totally sure what kind of magic goes into that. I assume they made it out of, like, infinity stones or something, and, like, I don't know. But so the Infinity Fabric is what kind of controls and I think delegates which CPU tackles which process. Intel, honestly, I look for them to probably do something very, very similar, and I think they are even doing it on some of their enterprise-grade stuff. Okay. Which, when AMD released that, Intel gave them crap saying that they're essentially gluing CPUs together to be able to outperform them, which Intel did the exact same thing with the Core 2 Quad. Essentially, it was 2 dual cores that were put together. But yeah, like it, and that's one of those things. You're gonna have AMD fans. You're gonna have Intel fans. Intel fans see it as like, well, yeah, Intel is probably feeling the heat on the consumer grade, but they have a total grip on the enterprise. Like your servers, your deep learning, all of that stuff is primarily Intel. Just because they've been the biggest competitor. Sure. But your A&D fans are going to say, well, in the consumer market. But, like I said, it's just interesting to be able to see Intel sweat. The CPU giant that they were that seemed unstoppable and, oh, man, seemed like they could just squash AMD at any moment.
And in theory, AMD fan or Intel fan, in theory, this is good for everyone, because if Intel has reached a place of complacency the only way that they'll step up and cater to their consumers is by having this pressure against them.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we got the first consumer grade 6-core from Intel. I mean, it's yeah, totally.
Only two competitors that are working as hard as they can against each other to deliver the best product they can is only good news for the consumer.
Yeah, and like I said, we've seen price decreases. We've seen finally updated product. We're seeing a lot of technology that has been kind of shadowed and protected, and we're finally seeing some of that come to life, which is super refreshing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're an hour and 10 minutes in.
What's your general cutoff? 1:15?
Usually I shoot for an hour.
Hour. Okay.
So I think honestly that's probably where we should wrap it up today. We'll save this topic for next week.
Okay.
So if you want to know what that topic is, you're just gonna have to stick around till next week.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, the suspense is killing you. But yeah, thank you for stopping by and hanging out, guys. Again, I'm Curtis with Digibit Tech. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like this stream, be sure to hit that like button or dislike button. You live folks will have to wait until after the show ends. But yeah, thanks for coming by, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. See ya.
Which button is it?
Oh, destroyed a property.
Here we go.